We need to have a serious conversation, and it's pouring outside and lightning like crazy, so I'm shut down for the moment. So I figured this would be a good time to have this serious conversation. So thanks for stopping by for another video. I truly appreciate it. I'm Colt Capperrune. If you're new here, feel free to subscribe and hit the bell next to the subscribe tab. Cheers, y'all. Everything I'm going to say in this video is the truth from my experience, and I would like to pass it on to you guys. So for most of my career, there was this illusion that you needed to work with labels and you would only make it or be successful if you were working with record labels. So the very first album that I produced, that I was a part of, that got picked up by a label, like, man, was that a good feeling. Like the level of legitimacy that it gave me, or it felt like it gave me. It just felt so good to have a label think that the work that I did was great enough to sign this band. But those were kind of different times. This was many years ago. And in 2018, 50% of the Grammy winners were independent artists. They did not have a label at all attached to them. Now, I probably need to do the math on 2020 and 2021, but I can only imagine the trend has been going this way for a long time, where less and less successful artists are actually on a label. So I guess I should go over some of the pros and cons of working with record labels before I actually get to the saucy, gossipy bit. Whew, had to let that cool off. Now we're ready to have a conversation. Okay, so here's some of the pros and cons of working with a label. Let's start with the pros first, actually. In the past, working with a label meant you were working on bigger, more successful, higher status clients, more successful artists. It meant that there was a much higher likelihood that the music you were working on was going to get played on FM radio. There was a much higher likelihood that it was going to win a Grammy. This is kind of all in the past. It did legitimize. I don't know what word I'm trying to use. It did make you more legitimate as a producer or a mixer or an artist. And so those were all good things. Now, some of that is still true today. There are bits and pieces of this that are still affected by working with a label. Also, in past years, you used to kind of get in with a label, with an A&R, or with a couple labels or a couple A&Rs, and they would just feed you work. I'm speaking as a producer and as a mixer. They would just feed you work, and so you never really had to go out and drum up work. If you were in the club and you were working with labels, you didn't actually have to go out and hustle all that hard to drum up independent work, and that also is doubly true because it gave you more legitimacy, so more independent artists wanted to work with you anyway. So those are some of the pros of working with a label, and some of that is kind of not a thing anymore, and some of it is still a little bit of a thing now. But cons. Let's get into the cons of working with a label. Firstly, everything moves extremely slow when you're working with a label. Getting mix revision notes or scheduling or decision-making, logistics of any kind, everything just moves so slow when you're working with a label because it has to go through multiple people every single decision. Sometimes you have a label executive giving you mix notes or production notes, and he or she doesn't know the first thing about music or music theory, doesn't know anything about mixing or songwriting at all. And I'm not saying that all label people are like this, because there are really wonderful people that work at some labels, but man, there are some people working at labels that have no business in the music business. Massive contracts for everything. The legal side of working with a label can sometimes be pretty extensive. Actually, let's talk about contracts for a second. This is a little bit of a side note. Now, I recommend that most people use contracts, but contracts don't actually mean anything if you don't have the time and the cash to take it to court when the project falls apart. So you could have an absolutely wonderful contract, but let's say the label or the client, the artist, whoever it is, doesn't pay you. Well, you have to be willing to take, the thousands or sometimes tens of thousands of dollars and at minimum days and sometimes up to months in court. You have to be willing to go through all this and fight to get your money. You have to back the contract up. The contract, the piece of paper, is absolutely worthless if you're not willing or able to go through the court process to win and get your money. And then after spending thousands or tens of thousands or days or possibly months in court, it's also possible that you would still lose and not get your money anyway. Not saying you shouldn't use one, you should use one, but just keep that in mind. Now, most labels say that they're going to pay net 30 or net 90 or net 60, whatever their particular thing is. And it just basically means that from the completion of the project, they will pay you 30 days or 90 days after the completion. However, in my experience, it is almost always longer than the agreed upon time frame. My current business structure, how I currently charge, is I'm paid 100% up front on every project. Now, this is not quite as cut and dried as it sounds, because commonly an artist will come to me, they want me to produce or they want me to mix. My mixing is a flat rate, and that is 100% paid up front. But when I'm producing for an artist, I will take a deposit. And then we will work until we've worked through the money that they've paid in that deposit. And then they will make another payment, and we will work until we've worked through that money. And then we'll have a final total in which they will pay the final total before I actually wrap the project up. And this does a couple things. One, this makes sure that I never get burned. Ever. I never have to wait to get paid. No one can rip me off because I'm not working on the music unless I've already been paid for the work I'm about to do. So I've kind of came to this arrangement after getting burned dozens of times and getting not paid and ripped off many, many times. And I'm just constantly readjusting my business practices so I don't get ripped off. When something happens, when something goes sideways, how do I try to make sure, how do I adjust and try to make sure that that thing never can happen again to me? So back to labels, about 50% of the projects that I've done for labels, indie and major, I had to pester them to get paid. They were at least late, like 50% of the time they were at least late. And then at worst, I had to pester them for many months to get paid. There was one project for a major label. This was quite a few handful of years ago, and I waited 10 months to get paid from this label. 10 months, almost a year to get paid from this major label. Now at the time, this was years ago, so at the time I was largely still living paycheck to paycheck. There's not much of a cushion to be able to, pay my bills while I waited 10 months to get paid. So as the years went by, I still would take some label projects when I wanted to be a part of it. And the last label project I worked on was 3.5 or 4 years ago, something like that. It was a pretty well-known indie label, and they approached me and wanted me to work with this artist. And I liked the artist, and the project seemed cool, and seemed like a good fit. I was very, very clear about that I was not going to wait 10 months to get paid. We had a conversation about that, and they assured me that they would pay net 30 at the most, but likely I would be paid by the end of the following week. It took 4.5 months to get paid from that label, and like most of the label projects that I've worked on, it just was a rough experience. Logistics were terrible, scheduling was terrible. Having an A&R rep that didn't really have any idea, didn't know anything about music, giving me mixed critiques, and it was a par for the course label experience. But 4.5 months later, I finally got paid, and I decided that I would no longer make exceptions for labels and let them pay me net 30 or net 90 or whenever they felt like paying me. That labels were also going to be held to the same payment structure that all the rest of my clients were paying on, and that's 100% paid up front, or at least paid in chunks up front, so that way I'm not owed anything at any time. So I've been asked to work on multiple label projects since this time, and as soon as I tell them that they have to pay up front, I don't hear from them again. And I'm perfectly fine with that. That's okay with me, honestly. Because in 2018, 50% of the Grammy winners didn't even have a label. I really need to add it up for 2021 and see what that was like. But labels are absolutely not a necessity nowadays. They're not necessary to the success of the artist. They're not necessary to the success of you as a producer or as a mixer or anything else. They can do some good things some of the time. So throughout my career, about 50% of the people that I've ever seen sign a record deal, whether I was part of the project or not, I just knew of them or knew them personally, about 50% of the people who signed a deal were never heard from again. They never released a single song after signing, and you literally never heard from them again. Their music career was over. This is crazy, and if someone would have told me this 15 years ago, I would have been like, you're full of it. There's no way, but this is my experience. About 30% of the people who signed a deal that I personally know or watched it happen, they did release music, they did do some stuff, but they were in a worse situation after signing than they were in as an independent artist. About 15% of people that I know that have signed a deal, it was fine. It was just fine. Didn't really help them, didn't really hurt them. It was just okay. And about 5%, as best as I can do the math, about 5% of the people that I knew that have signed a deal have actually become more successful than they were before they signed that deal. Some of them blew up to be massive artists. Some of them just became marginally more successful. But 5%, only 5% of people that I know who have signed a deal, it was worth it for them to sign this deal. The point I'm trying to make here is a record label or a record deal does not mean you have made it. Working with a label, if you're a producer or a mixer, it does not mean that you've arrived. The reason why I feel like this is important to share with you guys is I want to give you the best chance of success. That's what this whole channel is about. What do I wish someone would have told me 15 years ago or when I was 18 years old? One of the ways that you become successful at what it is that you do is by being efficient with your time and your energy and your money. And making the right decisions with those three things is incredibly important to you becoming successful in whatever it is that you do. I spent a lot of years going after labels. I spent a lot of years thinking that I needed to be working with labels in order to be successful. Had I not spent so much energy in that direction, I probably would have been further along and more successful in my career than I am now. And so that's the message I want to pass along to you guys, is be efficient with your time and just don't get stuck in the rut of thinking you have to work with labels or you need a record deal or whatever your situation is in order to be successful, because it's just not the case. It's just not true. It can help some people some of the time, and that's it. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell next to subscribe tab and drop me a comment. Leave me your saucy label story because I want to read them. Okay, thanks guys. We'll see you in the next one. Peace.